learners, and welcome to this session on Extension Program Planning and Development. Extension planners have to be very creative and innovative to program development efforts, which happen frequently. For this, they need to be very responsive to the changing needs and requirements of the communities. We need to understand that development projects, which are usually conducted in the communities, aim to bring about a change in the communities because of the changing policies and at the same time the changing market demands. These could be changing policies at the national level or changing policies at the state level. But at the same time, development projects also bring about a requirement from the communities, the grassroots level organizations and the community level efforts to fulfill their own requirements, needs and demands. In this way, their own aspirations get fulfilled. So as extension workers, extension planners, we need to understand that in both the situations, extension programs need adequate planning and preparation. So welcome again. In my previous two sessions, we had discussed about the evolution and concept of extension education as well as the principles of extension education. The objectives of this session would be to state the meaning of extension program and program planning. By the end of this session, you would be able to explain the characteristics of extension program planning. You will be able to state the objectives of extension program planning. You'll be able to highlight the principles of extension program planning. And finally, you would be able to holistically describe the steps involved in program planning and development process. Now, firstly, before we proceed, we need to understand the meaning of extension program. What does the essence of extension program mean to you? Let us look at some definitions. An extension program is a statement of situation, objectives, problems and solutions. It is relatively permanent but requires constant revision. It forms the basis for extension plans. An extension program is a set of clearly defined, consciously conceived educational objectives derived from an adequate analysis of the situation, which are to be achieved through extension. So in both these definitions, we see that an extension program has a statement of the situation, it has well spelled out objectives, we need to identify problems, solutions, but before that, it is very essential to do a situational analysis. The term program in these two definitions indicates focus, priority and design. A well-developed program to extension workers is like what a compass is to a seaman. It gives a very focused direction to the program. So the function of extension program is to provide a clear guide, a blueprint or a plan useful to the extension worker in conducting ongoing extension programs. The entire program should be based upon the needs of the people and their involvement in it all throughout. Now, after understanding what the meaning of extension program is, we should definitely know the meaning of program planning, because extension program planning in itself has a deeper meaning. What does program planning mean to all of us, future extension workers, development practitioners, teachers and students? Program planning is the process of making decisions about the direction and intensity of development education efforts to bring about desirable change among the people or community. So the basic essence of program planning or the basic goal of program planning will be to bring about a change which is desirable, a desirable change amongst the people or the community where you tend to work. It is a process of working with people in an effort to recognize the unsatisfactory situation and determine possible solutions or objectives or goals. It is definitely a decision-making process. It involves critical analysis of the existing situation and the problems. It involves evaluation of the various alternatives to solve these problems, and it is the selection of relevant alternatives, giving necessary priorities to each alternative based upon local needs and resources by the cooperative efforts of the people, both official and non-official, to facilitate the individual's growth and development. Here, official would mean those people who work from the government side, and non-official people are those who are the volunteers, people from the communities, and people who work on behalf of the communities and who belong to these communities. So program planning is a process of bringing planned change, because if you look at any program that is planned in any aspect of life, any realm, any organization, you see that it is a very systematic process, the process of planning, where you involve people, you try to identify their problems, you try to see what their needs are, you find out the best alternatives to each problem, you give priorities to which problem you need to first work on based on the existing local needs and resources, and then based on the cooperative needs of people, you facilitate the individuals in the community for their growth and development. So in this way you can see that program planning helps to fulfill the aspirations of the people in the communities by being very responsive to their needs, problems and interests. Therefore, that is why it is said here that program planning is a process of bringing planned change. Now, moving on to what the characteristics of program planning are, we need to understand that first and foremost, program planning is an educational process. Why? Because it involves both teaching and learning and teaches skills to the people in finding, analyzing, deliberating and focusing on the solutions to their problems. It gives more knowledge of the facts to the people and changes their attitude towards the planning process. So here it indicates that the process is educational because it is both teaching and learning, and we are trying to teach skills to people and enhance their knowledge. This in turn brings about a change in their behavior and attitude. Now the next characteristic of program planning is a unifying and integrating process. Definitely program planning is a unifying and integrating process when it comes to extension, because through the process of identifying problems, fixing their priorities, setting their objectives and goals and providing continuity and monitoring, people get a total picture of where they are, what they will do in future, what they shall do and where they are likely to reach after doing that process. So it unifies and integrates their goals as well as their process. Now the third characteristic is that program planning is a coordinating process. This requires coordination of efforts and activities between officials and non-officials, between institutions and organizations, between people and materials, and between similar associations. So you can see the amount of coordination which goes there between officials, non-officials, institutions, organizations, people of the communities and the resources or the materials they have, and between the similar associations with stakeholders. It could be between the research and development specialists, the field functionaries, the local volunteers, the grassroots level organizations and much more. So it all involves a level of coordination. So it is called a coordinating process. Of course, program planning is an evaluating process. It involves evaluation of the planning process and of the organization apart from the evaluation of accomplishment. We always often tend to think that Evaluation is usually done after the accomplishment happens, after you reach the goal, after you have achieved your goal. But that is not so in program planning. It also involves evaluation of the process, every step of the planning process and of the organization as well, which conducts the program planning. You can see that extension program planning is very holistic in nature, wherein it is educational, it is unifying, it is integrating, it is coordinating, and it is an evaluating process. Now, what are the objectives of extension program planning? So far, we have understood the meaning of extension program, the meaning of program planning. But what are the objectives of extension program planning? The objectives of extension program planning are multifarious, but they all work towards achieving the goal of community. The first objective is to ensure careful consideration of what is to be done and why. The second objective is to furnish a guide to judge all new proposals, to establish objectives towards which progress can be measured and evaluated. So, what, why, how to judge, how to find out about how effective a proposal is going to be able to work in the community is very, very important. Then also, when you plan, you make a plan or a roadmap to work in a community, you need to see that there are well established objectives towards which we can check the progress at every stage of program planning. Another salient objective of extension program planning is to aid in the development of leadership. Any program planning process has to always have this vision in mind that when this process happens, it has to build leadership within the community. It has to give continuity, particularly during changes in personnel. So in my previous session where I was speaking about the principles of extension education, one of the salient principles which I had talked about was the principle of continuing education. So the entire process of extension is of continuing education, which is an ongoing process. Similarly, here continuity refers to the program planning process in extension, which has to be a very continuous process, because there could be changes in personnel, there could be people who are changing, who are working in the communities, their roles could be changed, or there could be new people who would be added to be working in the communities. To have a means of choosing the important from the incidental problems and the permanent from the temporary changes. So when you choose a problem to work on, you need to realize that there could be several options of problems or needs which would be presented to you before the extension worker, which is you. So some problems could be very important in nature, which have long-term effects, and some problems could be short-term problems, which are incidental problems. So you need to be very focused in choosing the priorities, choosing the priority problem and working on it. This could be a more important problem, especially the long-term problem as compared to the short-term problems. But if you feel that a short-term problem is a very, very big problem, then you may combine it with a long-term problem and start working on it. Secondly, you need to choose the permanent from the temporary changes. You need to see that if you work on a problem, what kind of changes will it bring about? Will it bring about a permanent or a temporary change? And likewise, choose the problem which will bring about a permanent change. To prevent mistaking the means for the end and to develop both felt and unfelt needs. Often, while working in the communities, extension workers think that suppose they find a step in middle which leads them to the end goal, they think that that step or the means is the end in itself. That is not so. You need to be very, very careful to identify and understand that this is just a means and this is not the end, and then develop both felt and unfelt needs. Felt needs are those needs which the communities will voice, which the people in the communities will tell you that okay, this need is very, very important in nature, but there could be an underlying need which could be also equally important but which they are not able to speak up. So these are both felt and unfelt needs which you need to work on. Another objective of extension program planning is to coordinate the efforts of the different people working for rural or community development. Of course, without coordination, which is also a principle of extension education, program planning goals will not be achieved. To avoid wastage of time and money and promote general efficiency, that is the best utilization of resources, to encourage the local people to give extension workers more support, thus ensuring cooperation and financial support. To have available in written form a statement for general public use. Now this also is a very salient objective which says that there should be a proper statement in written form for the general public to use so that they can use it as a guideline or as a roadmap to look at their goals and identify their problems accordingly. Now coming to the principles of extension program planning, I shall not discuss these in detail because much of aspects which have been highlighted in the principles of extension program planning rhyme with the principles of extension education. Let us look at these principles, the principles of extension program planning. Extension program should have clear and significant objectives which could satisfy important needs of the people. Extension programs should fix up priority on the basis of available resources and time. Extension programs should have a general agreement at various levels. There should be a common understanding of decisions, processes and resources at various levels. This is what this principle implies. Extension programs should involve people at the local levels. So if you relate these principles to the principles of extension education, you'll realize that there is a commonality or similarity between these principles and the principles of extension education. Extension programs should involve relevant institutions and organizations. We mean the stakeholders here, the external sources or resources. Extension program should have a definite plan of work. There has to be a proper plan with a lot of activities step by step in sequence to work on. Extension program should provide for evaluation of results and reconsideration of the program. So we need to understand that when we review the results, we come to a point where we reconsider the program so that when you do the program again or you carry out the program again, if there are any changes or modifications to be incorporated in the program, then you'll need to modify your program plan. Extension program should provide for equitable distribution of benefits amongst the members of the community. We have now come to the steps in the program planning and development process. Now the series of steps involves first, collection and analysis of data. Second, determination of needs and objectives. Third, definition, identification of problems. Fourth, finding solutions. Fifth, selecting problems and determining priorities. Sixth, preparing a plan of action. Seventh, carrying out the plan. Eighth, checking and evaluating results. And ninth, reconsideration or review of progress and projection of plans. Now let us understand the steps in program planning and development process one by one. The first step, collection, analysis and evaluation of data, is a very significant one. Good planning depends on the collection of adequate and reliable data. We all are familiar with this. An intimate knowledge of literacy levels, school goers, cropping patterns, procedures of farm management, the health status of the community and the factors of production is essential for purposeful program planning in any area. It is important that all extension workers possess factual and basic farm and family information required for preparing sound family, village and block plans. First of all, the basic information about the village, including culture, occupation, climatic and geographical conditions and much more, has to be ascertained. Secondly, information about farm management, production programs, entrepreneurship programs, health related programs, water and sanitation programs and similar such programs has to be ascertained. Persons such as village level workers, extension officers and block development officers engaged in developing the extension program should strengthen the local institutions like panchayat, cooperative society, school and rural youth club by collecting the factual data through them and using them for building the program at the family, village and block levels. Let us now come to the second step. The second step is determination of needs and objectives. In the program planning process, before deciding on the projects to be undertaken, the basic objectives of the program are determined by the villagers in consultation with extension staff. Villagers must have a very clear understanding of their needs, problems and of the project so that they are able to decide the objectives for village programs. So it has to come from them ideally. Objectives can also be decided by the head or active member of the participating family for family plans and by the village panchayat in case activities are to be undertaken at community level. Many times it so happens that the objectives of the program may not be clear to the villagers. In such situations, the extension staff may give a lead to the villagers in determining the specific objectives. The objectives should specify the behavioral changes in people besides the social and economic changes aimed at and also satisfy the other criteria at the village development level. The third step is definition of problems, a very salient step towards extension program planning. First, basically the problems can be of three types. Firstly, problems which can be solved by the villagers with their own resources, like improving yields by adopting improved methods of agricultural production, food production which are very nutritive in nature, improving the manure potential by preparing compost manure, organizing service cooperatives, rural youth clubs, Mahila mandals and other such groups. The second kind of problem could be, the nature of the problem could be such that the needs of community cooperation without involving outside assistance is enough, like the construction of a village approach road by a voluntary effort, improving village drainage, deepening of tanks, afforestation of common land and so on. The third kind of problem could be problems that require assistance from outside sources on account of high costs involved and the technical knowledge needed, such as the construction of a school building, purchase and use of plant protection equipment, installation of pumping sets, construction of tube wells and much more. Now, finding solutions to problems. Extension workers should have a clear understanding of the village problems and keep themselves equipped for offering solutions to the problems and present to them. They must consult their superior specialists on problems they are not able to handle themselves. So often extension workers might not be well equipped with knowledge or technical know-how as to how they can solve problems of communities which need scientific or technological leverage. For this, they can seek the consultation of scientists or specialists from research and development organizations for this purpose. To solutions offered, they should be practicable, economical, and should result in satisfaction and learning. The best method of convincing the villagers is for specialists to function in the program as partners. Specialists could be NGOs, research and development specialists, and many such other organizations who would like to help the communities and function as stakeholders. Moving on to the next step in the process of extension program planning, selecting problems to be tackled with priority. So all the problems we need to understand cannot be tackled simultaneously, even though the solutions for them are known to you. So extension workers and the village institutions should select problems and concentrate their efforts on projects in a very phased manner. This will result in desired achievements and convince village people about the utility of that program. So sporadic efforts sometimes, they do not create lasting and convincing impressions on the minds of rural people. Program committees set up at village and block levels should review the situation periodically for determining how much progress has been made on projects underway, which projects are complete and which new projects may be initiated. Preparing the annual plan of work. Often we forget to do this in program planning. What is preparing the annual plan of work? Preparing the annual plan of activities is directed towards solving selected problems. This is a very, very important step in program planning. A plan of work is a listing of activities by which the objectives which are already decided upon by the people and by the extension workers and village heads are to be achieved. It includes the method of executing the program, such as demonstrations, discussion meetings, family contacts by the extension workers, etc. It indicates the places, timings and persons responsible for carrying out the program, along with the methods of evaluating the process. Village organizations such as panchayats, cooperatives, schools, rural youth clubs and individual families can prepare their own annual plans of work in a simple way. Carrying out the plan, the success of a program depends on how well it is carried out. We all know this to be making our program successful. Steps should be taken by the village development officer and local institutions at the village level, the extension specialist, the block development officer and the panchayat samiti at the block level to phase every activity in a proper perspective and arrange all the resources in advance, such as equipment, credit, money, audiovisual aids, literature and much more. A training program for specialized projects should be organized much ahead in time. Efforts should be made to select the best type of local leaders who can act responsibly and multiply the efforts of the extension agency. Above all the steps in carrying out a program should be discussed with the villagers and their consent has to be obtained at appropriate periods so that a partnership in the program is built up and maintained. And we all know how important partnership is to development program. Continuous checking and evaluation of results. Now you have to keep adequate records of each activity, which becomes a basis for the future evaluation. Often we see that in our own work life also, we keep records of our work so that we can keep assessing our work and improving them. The same goes with extension program planning. Evaluation of the activities should be undertaken jointly by the extension staff, the village institutions and the panchayat samiti. Each future program should be based on the evaluation results of the previous one. Successful evaluation gives the correct direction to a program. It should be remembered that evaluation is not mere recording of activities or achievements, of course not, but it is a process of comparing these results with the original objectives. So always remember that to evaluate, you have to compare the results, your achievements with the original objectives which were charted in the beginning of the program. Finally, we come to the last step of the program planning process, which is reconsideration or review of progress and projection of plans. So at the end of each cycle of the program building process, the situation should be reconsidered in view of the changes in the social and economic levels of the people, so that the whole process may begin again with new or modified objectives. Village institutions like the panchayat, the cooperative, the school and panchayat samiti should periodically review the process of plans, their progress in cooperation with the staff members of the block. Programs which have created an impact or a dent on people get accepted by them and should be extended to the neighboring areas where similar agroclimatic and socio-economic conditions exist. Research should be conducted on the programs which are not being accepted by the people. We need to ascertain the reasons for their failure. This is the reconsideration process. Programs should never be considered as ends in themselves. No program ends. It is an ongoing process in extension. They are merely tools for doing more effective work. A proper adjustment of time and energy spent in preparing a program should always be maintained with the actual implementation of the program in the field. It should be noted that evaluation, decision, planning and action take place continuously and in varying degrees throughout all steps of the program building process. With this, we come to the end of this session. I would now request all of you learners to pick out your pen and paper and note down the steps in program planning and development process. While noting down the steps in the program planning process, I would want you to pick up a problem from any village community you are familiar with and start working on the steps of program planning. This will give you a hands-on idea as to what program planning in extension education is. Thank you till we meet in the next session.